Wife pushes disabled U.S. Marine off a cliff. What his German Shepherd does next saves him. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to the story of our main character. Eli Morgan, a former U.S. Marine, had once stood tall and proud, serving his country with unwavering courage. But life, as it often does, had a way of changing things. Years ago, a roadside bomb had torn through his world, leaving him in a wheelchair and shattering his body. His legs no longer worked, and the weight of his injuries was more than physical. It was emotional. The scars from battle were deep, but those from betrayal went even deeper. His wife, Vanessa, had been his rock, or so he thought. They had met years before during a military fundraiser, and what started as a whirlwind romance had turned into a life together in the peaceful mountains of Montana. But something had changed. Over time, Vanessa's warmth faded, replaced by coldness and distance. Eli began to suspect that she was more interested in his disability benefits and the land he had inherited than in him as a person. Eli had put up with it, hoping it was just a phase, but as time went on, the cracks in their relationship became more apparent. That fateful morning, Eli had wheeled himself out to the edge of the cliffs, where he and Vanessa had once talked about their future together. But this time, the conversation was different. Vanessa's cold words and unfeeling gestures made it clear that she had no intentions of staying by his side. And then, with one swift motion, she pushed him. The chair tipped over the edge of the cliff, and Eli found himself plummeting toward the jagged rocks below. He couldn't feel his legs, but the pain from the fall was excruciating. He was barely hanging on to life, his body broken and battered, but still, something in him fought. As he lay there, gasping for breath, it seemed like the world had forgotten him. Vanessa walked away, leaving him for dead, her steps fading into the distance. Eli's heart raced, his mind spinning in a haze of pain and confusion. But just when it seemed like all hope was lost, something incredible happened. Ghost, his loyal German shepherd, appeared from the shadows. Ghost had always been by Eli's side, his companion in life's darkest moments. The dog had never left him, not even once. And now, it seemed like Ghost was the only one who could save him. The dog's amber eyes locked onto Eli's, and in that moment, Eli could feel the connection they shared, a bond so strong that it transcended everything. Ghost barked, his voice sharp and full of urgency, as if calling out for help. He ran to Eli's side, nudging him with his nose, trying to keep him conscious. Eli could barely hold on, but he knew one thing: Ghost wasn't going to let him go. With a final burst of strength, Ghost tugged at Eli's jacket, pulling him closer to safety. Despite the odds, despite the fall, despite everything, Ghost was there. He refused to leave Eli, just as Eli had never given up on him. As the pain slowly faded and Eli's breath steadied, he realized that sometimes, the greatest miracles come from the most unexpected places. And in that moment, as Ghost's body lay next to his, Eli knew that he wasn't alone. He wasn't abandoned. His battle was far from over, but with Ghost by his side, he had a fighting chance. As Eli lay on the rocky ground, his body screaming in pain, he could hardly believe what had just happened. The world around him spun in a haze, and the cold wind bit into his skin. His breath came in shallow gasps, and his vision blurred. But through the fog of confusion, one thing was clear: Ghost was there. The German shepherd's eyes locked onto his with an intensity that pierced through the storm. Ghost nudged Eli's body gently with his nose, as if telling him not to give up. Eli's heart, though broken, stirred with the faintest glimmer of hope. Ghost wasn't leaving him. Not now, not ever. Ghost had always been there, ever since they first met years ago in Afghanistan, and even after Eli's injury, when the world had seemed to turn its back on him. Ghost remained his constant companion. Through the darkest days, the hardest nights, and the loneliest moments, Ghost had been by his side, offering comfort when there was none to be found. The bond between them was unbreakable. As Eli struggled to gather the strength to move, Ghost barked once, sharp and urgent, then moved to his side. He was determined, as always. He nudged Eli's body, trying to pull him to safety. Eli, feeling the weight of the dog's loyalty, fought against the pain and managed to shift his position, just enough to feel the warmth of Ghost's fur against his skin. The dog's presence was like a lifeline, a reminder that no matter what had happened, he wasn't alone. Slowly, Eli's heart began to steady. His mind was clearer now, focused on Ghost, the only thing that mattered. Ghost continued to nudge and paw at him, each touch a silent plea for Eli to hold on. And in that moment, Eli realized the truth: Ghost was not just a dog. He was his guardian, his savior, his best friend. They had been through so much together, and now, as they faced this life-or-death struggle, their bond was stronger than ever. With every ounce of strength Eli could muster, he began to push himself up, leaning on Ghost for support. It wasn't easy, his body ached with every movement, but with Ghost's help, he managed to pull himself into a sitting position. For the first time since the fall, Eli dared to hope. With Ghost's guidance, Eli made his way towards the edge of the cliff, his movements slow but steady. He couldn't do it alone, but with Ghost by his side, anything seemed possible. They had both faced death together before, and now, in this moment of danger, they would fight for survival once again. The cold wind howled around them, but it didn't matter. The bond between a Marine and his dog was unbreakable, and Eli knew, without a doubt, that they would make it out of this together. As the hours passed, Eli's world became a blur of pain and fading light. His body was weak, and the cold seemed to seep into his bones, but Ghost never left his side. The German Shepherd was the one thing that kept him tethered to the world, and with each step they took together, Eli felt a little more alive. It wasn't easy. Every inch of movement felt like an eternity, but with Ghost's steady presence guiding him, Eli was determined to make it out of the woods alive. The trail ahead was treacherous, and Eli had no idea how far he had to go, but he kept moving. Ghost's reassuring presence made him believe that they could overcome anything, just like they always had. They moved slowly, carefully, with Eli relying on Ghost for support, one step at a time. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Eli could feel his strength waning, but there was no stopping now. He couldn't afford to give up, not with Ghost by his side. As they continued, Eli's thoughts drifted back to the day everything changed. The day Vanessa had pushed him off that cliff. He had trusted her. He had loved her. But now, it was clear that trust was broken. Vanessa had shown him a side of herself that Eli never thought he would see. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound he had ever received. Yet, as he sat there, supported by Ghost, Eli realized something. Despite everything that had happened, despite the pain and the betrayal, he still had a reason to keep fighting. He had Ghost. And that was enough. Ghost had always been there for him, through thick and thin. From their days in Afghanistan, where they fought side by side, to the quiet nights in the mountains of Montana, where they had simply existed together, Ghost had been the constant in Eli's life. The bond they shared was unspoken but undeniable. They understood each other in a way no one else could. As they made their way down the mountain, Ghost's tail wagged softly, and for the first time in hours, Eli felt a glimmer of hope. The world around him was still cold and dark, but with Ghost by his side, it didn't seem quite as hopeless. They had been through worse, and they would survive this too. The night air grew colder as the light from the setting sun faded completely. Eli's mind was foggy, but he could still feel Ghost's steady pace beside him, a reminder that he wasn't alone. They continued to move forward, one step at a time, knowing that their journey was far from over. Eli wasn't sure how much farther they had to go, but he knew one thing for sure. With Ghost by his side, he had a chance. They would make it out of this, together. As the last light of day disappeared, Eli finally let his guard down, allowing himself to rest, even if only for a moment. The warmth of Ghost's body next to his brought a sense of peace that Eli had not felt in what seemed like forever. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the darkness of the wilderness, Eli knew that no matter what happened next, he wasn't alone. As the hours passed, Eli's body began to feel the effects of exhaustion, but Ghost never wavered. The German shepherd remained vigilant by his side, his presence a constant source of strength. Eli couldn't help but think about how much he owed this dog. Ghost had not only saved his life once again, but had also given him the courage to keep moving forward. They had made it through the darkest parts of the forest, but the journey wasn't over. Eli could still feel the cold air biting into his skin, but with Ghost's warmth and determination, the cold didn't seem as unbearable. Slowly but surely, the two of them made their way through the dense woods, each step more difficult than the last, but neither one of them was willing to give up. The further they went, the more Eli began to realize just how much he had underestimated Ghost. He had always known the dog was loyal, but the true depth of that loyalty was only becoming clear now. Ghost had refused to leave him, even when the situation seemed hopeless. When Eli had fallen, when he was abandoned by his wife, it was Ghost who had stayed by his side, refusing to give up. The bond they shared was something deeper than just a pet and its owner. It was a partnership forged in the hardest of times, a partnership that had never faltered, no matter how difficult the journey. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Eli knew that they were nearing the end of their journey. His body was tired, but there was a sense of peace that had begun to settle over him. The weight of the betrayal he had felt earlier was still there, but it was starting to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of gratitude for the dog who had never once let him down. Finally, they reached the edge of the forest, and Eli could see the familiar outline of a small cabin in the distance. He had made it. He had survived, thanks to Ghost. Ghost had not only saved his life, but had also reminded him that no matter what happens, there is always a reason to keep going. There was always a chance for redemption, for healing, for a new beginning. As they walked toward the cabin, Eli turned to look at Ghost, his loyal companion, and whispered softly, "We made it, boy. Together." The dog's amber eyes locked onto his, and for a brief moment, it felt as though they both understood. They had been through hell, but they had made it out, stronger than ever. And as they reached the cabin door, Eli knew that whatever came next, he would face it with Ghost by his side, as they had always done. As Eli stepped into the cabin, the warmth of the air wrapped around him like a blanket, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he allowed himself to relax. The fire crackled softly in the corner, casting a soft glow across the room. It was simple, just a small wooden cabin, but it felt like a sanctuary after everything they had been through. Ghost walked beside him, his amber eyes flicking around the room before he lay down on the rug by the fire, settling in with a soft sigh. Eli looked at the dog, his heart swelling with gratitude. They had made it. They were both alive. As Eli sat down on the old wooden chair near the fire, he couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. The pain, the betrayal, the fear, it all seemed so distant now, almost like a bad dream. But the truth was, Eli had been through something no one should ever have to experience. The one person he had trusted the most had turned her back on him when he needed her the most. It wasn't just the physical pain of his injuries that had hurt. It was the emotional toll of being abandoned by the one person he had thought would always be there. But now, sitting in the quiet cabin with Ghost by his side, Eli realized something important. The pain wasn't permanent. It might always be a part of him, but it didn't define him. He wasn't broken, and he wasn't alone. Ghost had proven that. The German shepherd had been with him through thick and thin, and no matter what came next, Eli knew they would face it together. The two of them had a bond that couldn't be broken by anything, no betrayal, no hardship, no physical injury. Eli had always been a Marine, and even though his body had been damaged, his spirit hadn't been defeated. With Ghost by his side, he could face anything. They both could. As the fire burned low and the room grew darker, Eli's thoughts turned to the future. He didn't know what the next chapter would hold, but for the first time in a long while, he wasn't afraid. The road ahead might be uncertain, but it was no longer something to fear. Ghost had shown him that hope wasn't lost. No matter how dark things seemed, there was always a way forward. And as Eli closed his eyes, the warmth of the fire and the steady presence of Ghost brought him the peace he had been searching for. Tomorrow would come, and together, they would face it, just as they always had. Days passed, and the peace of the cabin began to work its magic on Eli. The soreness in his body never fully went away, but there was a new sense of calm that filled the spaces once occupied by fear and doubt. Ghost remained as loyal as ever, never straying too far from Eli's side, offering comfort with his mere presence. Every time Eli looked at him, he was reminded that he was not alone. It had been a long time since he'd felt this kind of connection, since he had felt this kind of peace. Slowly, Eli began to adjust to life outside the chaos. The stillness of the cabin was a stark contrast to the constant noise and danger he had once known as a Marine. But here, in this quiet space, Eli found a rhythm. He spent his days tending to the small garden outside, cleaning his gear, and enjoying the small moments of calm. There were times when the memories of his life before the fall, before the betrayal, would creep back into his mind. The pain of those memories was still there, but it was fading. Like a distant storm. He was learning to live with it, rather than let it define him. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting its golden light across the mountains, Eli sat on the porch, his gaze lost in the beauty of the landscape. Ghost sat beside him, as always, his head resting gently on Eli's knee. The wind rustled through the trees, and for the first time in a long while, Eli felt a sense of contentment. It wasn't perfect, and he knew there would be challenges ahead, but in that moment, he was at peace. The betrayal, the pain, the uncertainty, they were all still there, but they no longer had the power to control him. He was stronger now, and he owed it all to Ghost. The dog had shown him what it meant to never give up, to keep moving forward, even when the world seemed to be against you. Ghost had saved him, not just physically, but emotionally as well. Eli had always believed in loyalty, but now he understood it in a way he never had before. Ghost had given him something more than just survival, he had given him hope. As the days turned into weeks, Eli began to reclaim a sense of purpose. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he was ready to face it. With Ghost by his side, he knew he could take on anything. Together, they had survived the darkest of times, and now, they were ready for whatever came next. As weeks went by, Eli found himself adapting to a new rhythm. The cabin, once a symbol of his isolation, had now become a place of quiet refuge. With Ghost by his side, the days no longer felt as empty. Eli spent much of his time working on small projects around the cabin, fixing up old furniture, building a shelf for his books, and tending to the small garden that Ghost often roamed through, sniffing the flowers and rolling in the grass. There were still days when the weight of his past lingered, when the scars of his betrayal would rise to the surface. On those days, he would sit by the fire, watching the flames dance, and allow himself to feel the pain, but always with the understanding that it would pass. The anger and resentment had begun to fade, replaced by a quiet strength that he hadn't known he was capable of. The bond he had with Ghost had grown even deeper, and it was more than just survival now. They had found a new purpose together, in this small, quiet place. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Eli and Ghost took a walk through the woods behind the cabin. The air was crisp, the trees whispering in the wind, and the world seemed to hold its breath. As they walked, Eli realized how much he had changed. He had come to this cabin broken, but now he was healing. Not just physically, but emotionally as well. The pain of his past no longer controlled him. He was learning to move forward, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Ghost had given him the strength to see that. Ghost had never once wavered in his loyalty, and in return, Eli had found the courage to live again. As they reached a clearing in the woods, Eli stopped and looked out at the landscape before him. The world seemed vast, but he no longer felt small. He no longer felt lost. For the first time in a long while, he felt at peace. The wind stirred the leaves around them, and Ghost's ears perked up at the sound. He looked up at Eli, his amber eyes shining with something that could only be described as understanding. Eli smiled, his heart swelling with gratitude. He didn't know what the future would hold, but for the first time, he wasn't afraid. He had a companion who would always be there, and together, they could face whatever came next. The journey had been long, but Eli knew that with Ghost by his side, they could go anywhere. As the last light of day faded into the night, Eli turned to head back to the cabin, his steps steady, knowing that they had found a new beginning, together. As the weeks continued to pass, Eli and Ghost settled into their new life in the cabin, finding peace in the quiet simplicity of their days. The routine had become comforting, mornings spent tending to the garden, afternoons by the fire, and evenings under the stars, reflecting on how far they had come. The healing process, both physical and emotional, was slow, but it was real. Eli had stopped counting the days since the fall, since the betrayal, because now each day was a step forward, no longer defined by the past. Ghost had proven, time and time again, that he was more than just a dog. He was a companion, a protector, a constant source of unwavering loyalty. His presence had filled the emptiness in Eli's heart, and slowly, that void was being replaced by something new, a sense of hope, a belief in second chances. One crisp autumn afternoon, Eli took a walk down the trail that led to the lake near their cabin. The leaves were changing, their bright reds and yellows creating a picturesque scene, and for the first time in a long while, Eli felt a sense of gratitude for the world around him. Ghost trotted beside him, his tail wagging gently as he sniffed the air, his eyes always alert, always aware of his surroundings. As they neared the water's edge, Eli stopped and gazed out at the calm lake. The reflection of the trees in the water was almost perfect, the stillness of the scene matching the quiet peace that had settled in his heart. He had spent so many years in turmoil, struggling with loss, with guilt, with anger, but now, in this moment, there was only peace. He could feel the weight of his past lifting, bit by bit, replaced by a quiet strength he hadn't known he had. Ghost, as always, stayed close, his presence grounding Eli, reminding him that no matter what had happened before, he was not alone. The bond between them was more than just survival, it was the kind of bond that transcended everything else, the kind that was built on trust, loyalty, and love. As Eli crouched down to stroke Ghost's fur, he smiled. The road ahead wasn't clear, but it no longer mattered. For the first time in a long while, Eli was looking forward to the future, whatever it might hold. Ghost was there, and that was all he needed. Together, they had faced the darkest days and come out the other side, stronger than ever. The future was uncertain, but with Ghost by his side, Eli knew they could face anything. They had each other, and that was enough. As the months passed, Eli and Ghost continued to thrive in their small cabin by the lake. The once haunting memories of betrayal and loss had faded into the background, replaced by a sense of peace that Eli had never imagined he would find again. The pain that had once consumed him no longer had a hold on him. He had learned to live with it, to accept it, but it no longer defined him. His days were simple now, quiet mornings with Ghost, tending to the garden, and evenings spent by the fire. It wasn't the life he had once envisioned, but it was a life filled with purpose. Every day, Eli found himself growing stronger, both in body and spirit. The physical scars of his injuries were still there, but they no longer felt like the chains that had once bound him. His body had healed, though it would never be the same. But he was learning to embrace this new version of himself, and in doing so, he had found a sense of freedom he had never known. Ghost, too, had flourished in this new life. The German shepherd's once wary eyes were now filled with calm, his once restless energy had found a quiet place in the cabin, where he could simply be. He had proven to Eli time and time again that loyalty and love could heal even the deepest wounds, and it was through Ghost's unwavering companionship that Eli had rediscovered the strength within himself. One particular evening, as the sun began to set and the air grew crisp with the promise of winter, Eli found himself sitting on the porch with Ghost at his side. The sky was painted in hues of orange and purple, the lake reflecting the colors like a mirror. It was a scene that felt almost too perfect to be real. Eli let out a deep sigh, the kind of sigh that comes with a heart full of gratitude. He had come so far from the man he had been, the man broken by betrayal, the man who had lost so much. And yet, here he was, sitting on the porch of a small cabin with his loyal dog by his side, watching the sunset and feeling a sense of peace. He had found a new beginning, not in spite of everything he had gone through, but because of it. Ghost, sensing his calm, laid his head on Eli's knee, his eyes looking up at him with a quiet understanding. Eli smiled, his hand reaching down to scratch the dog's ears. "We made it, buddy," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Ghost gave a soft woof, as if in agreement. It was in this moment, with the sun sinking low and the world quiet around them, that Eli realized something profound. The journey they had been on, through the pain, the betrayal, the fear, had been difficult, but it had led him here, to this peaceful moment. It was a reminder that sometimes the hardest paths lead to the most beautiful destinations. And as Eli sat there, with Ghost by his side, he knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together. They had already overcome the greatest challenges life had thrown at them, and now, with nothing left to fear, they could move forward into whatever came next.